let's talk about the cardiac cycle. The cardiac cycle refers to one heartbeat, that is one contraction and relaxation of the heart. There are two important terms to know here. The first is systole. Systole refers to contraction of the heart muscle, so pushing blood out as the muscle contracts. The other is diastole, which refers to the relaxation of the heart muscle during which the heart is filling with blood. In the video on the screen, we can see the contraction, or systole, and the relaxation, diastole, of the heart. You may notice that the chambers of the heart do not contract at the same time. In the video, the atria are here, and the ventricles are here. The atria contract first to push blood into the ventricles, and then the ventricles contract to push blood out to the rest of the body. It wouldn't be as efficient if the atria and the ventricles contracted at the same time. As we take a closer look at the cardiac cycle, I want you to pay attention to what is happening to the chambers, what is happening to the valves, and what is happening to the blood at each of the three phases. The first phase of the cardiac cycle is diastole. During diastole, the atria and the ventricles are both relaxed. Blood is flowing from the vena cava and the pulmonary veins into the atria, and then it flows right down into the ventricles. So the atria and the ventricles are both filling with blood during diastole. If blood is able to go right from the great vessels through the atria into the ventricles, what's going on with the AV valves? Are the AV valves going to be open or closed? Open. During diastole, the AV valves are open to allow the blood to flow through the atria directly into the ventricles. During diastole, the semilunar valves are closed. This is important to keep the blood that's already been pushed into the arteries from flowing back into the ventricles. At the end of diastole, we move into atrial systole, the second phase of the cardiac cycle. In atrial systole, the atria contract. The ventricles remain relaxed. The atria contract, and that pushes blood into the ventricles to complete the filling of the ventricles. In order for this to occur, the AV valves are still open, so blood can be pushed from the atria into the ventricles. And the semilunar valves are still closed to keep blood from flowing out of the arteries back into the ventricles. At the completion of atrial systole, the heart goes into ventricular systole. During ventricular systole, the atria relax and the ventricles contract. The powerful contraction of the ventricles pushes the AV valves closed. So usually the cusps of the AV valves dangle down into the ventricles. As the ventricles contract, the pressure of the blood pushes the cusps of the AV valves up, and that's what closes the AV valves. The pressure of the ventricular contraction pushes the semilunar valves open. So the blood pushes against the semilunar valves until they are pushed open so that the blood can flow from the ventricles and be pushed up into the pulmonary trunk and the aorta. At the completion of ventricular systole, the heart returns to diastole, the AV valves open, the semilunar valves close, the ventricles and the atria are relaxed, and blood flows back into the heart again. We can actually hear some of the events of the cardiac cycle using a stethoscope to listen to the heart. When you listen to the heart, you can hear what we call the heart sounds, the sort of lubbed up, lubbed up, lubbed up of the heartbeat. These heart sounds result from the closing of valves in the heart. The valves themselves are actually silent. They don't make a noise when they close. But when a valve closes, blood hits against that closed valve and causes turbulence that we can hear that makes that two-part sound, the lub, which we call S1, or the first heart sound, and the dup, which is S2, or the second heart sound. S1, the first heart sound, is caused by the closing of the AV valves. When the AV valves get pushed closed, the blood hitting those valves causes the first heart sound, the lub part. What phase of the cardiac cycle are we in when we close those AV valves? Ventricular systole. Remember that it's the contraction of the ventricles that pushes the AV valves closed and causes the first heart sound. The second heart sound, S2, is caused by the closing of the semilunar valves. When the semilunar valves snap closed, we hear the blood hitting them, and that's what makes the second heart sound, or the dup. At which phase of the cardiac cycle are we going to hear that second heart sound when we close the semilunar valves? That marks the beginning of diastole. As the heart goes into diastole, then the ventricles relax, and that allows the semilunar valves to come down and close. So the first heart sound tells us when we have ventricular systole, and the second heart sound tells us when we've got diastole. Sometimes when you're listening to the heart sounds, you can hear a murmur. A heart murmur is caused when the valves don't close completely. Whenever a valve fails to close completely, we call that valvular insufficiency.